Welcome in, everybody, to the Sony Open in Hawaii 2025 breakdown show. Got Chris in here. Really excited for this. We've not done a show in quite a while together, so pretty jazzed up to do this one and many more throughout the PGA Tour year, and hopefully back to the NASCAR streets together that we really enjoy doing as well each and every week. So glad to be able to make our schedules work to get back together. I know you're excited. I'll let you kind of touch on that here in a sec. But, last week we had one intro kind of a, all-star event, basically. Shorter field, no cut, and 35 under winner. So how are you feeling about the year and excited to get in on this?
I was last week. I didn't end up watching any. It was on a ski holiday, and I was kind of with what Shane Lowry said is, you take the Christmas season off and the holiday season, and then all of a sudden you have to go to Hawaii and shoot 35 under to try and win a golf tournament. No thanks. So that's the way I was to start the season. But I'm super pumped for this start of the season here because honestly, man, I think it's been close to a year since we've done a show together. I've been pretty pumped to talk golf. I've kind of taken life in a whole different direction a little bit with running a little bit of a restaurant resort in Saskatchewan here. But I'm super pumped now that I've got through 1 year. Adjusted my schedule some so I can get back in there and talk some golf. And definitely, like you said, I can't wait till NASCAR season as well because that's kind of where our YouTube shows really kicked off things for us with Jagerbaum's Fantasy Sports. So talk some Sony Open.
Yeah, and won't be long till NASCAR season. Probably like a month away, which is
exactly.
So we've also got DOB. He's in the chat tonight, and he'll be probably rotating. You guys, if you've watched any of our content before, you might have seen him on our college football show earlier in the year when we were knocking that one down weekly. And then we've also got Nate, who's a new addition to the team, and he might be rotating on some as well. So we might end up with a panel of 3 or 4 some weeks, maybe especially for maybe the majors or something. So I'm really excited for what we've got going on. Got a great team, a lot of sports being covered each and every day. So really excited to see what 2025 holds. Let's get into it. Let's get into the course at Waialae. So we've seen this course a lot of years now, as long as I can remember, especially doing content. So we've got, kind of a much shorter, I'll let you really break down the course, but we've got a lot shorter course than what we had last week. It's not going to be the same at all off the tee in the way that I view this place, but maybe give us a little breakdown of the course, things you've seen in the past, and the way you attack this event.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look at it from a perspective of some people maybe look at it like two Hawaii courses just off on holidays. Well, there was a third minus 35 under winner last week. This is like a total flip. There's no super wide fairways. These are some very narrow fairways where driving accuracy all of a sudden becomes a big stat that we're going to look at this week. And we're looking at probably a winning score outside of that year in 2020 when it was really windy. I think maybe that was a Justin Thomas win. I have to look back here. But that was a minus 11 winning score. Other than that, we're looking at probably around that minus 19, minus 20. So it should be a really good course. So yeah, definitely when it comes to stats looking out here, we want driving accuracy number 1, maybe look at some proximity off the fairway, strokes gained approach. But then when we want to key in on those approaches, just looking at Fantasy National, where they track the average distances used each and every week, we're looking at the 150 to 175 and 175 to 200 ranges are definitely higher than tour average, where a lot of those approach shots are going to come from. So that's something I factor into my model as well. But pretty much I'm looking higher than normal strokes gain off the tee with some driving accuracy in there. Fairways gained if you're using the Fantasy National. I use that. I'm going to reference that quite a bit. I use that site a lot as well. You get to a little bit more up to date, like last 12, last 8 rounds, that kind of stuff. Strokes gained approaches in my model, and then par 4 scoring, just because it's a par 70. We've only got 2 par 5s. There is a lot of scoring that comes from those par fives, obviously. So instead of just regular par five scoring, I look at the par five birdie or better percentage because I mean, if you're not getting birdie on at least -2, -3, even with an eagle chance going through on those par fives, you're probably falling behind the field a little bit there. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. In terms of weather, I see the first 2 days, Thursday, Friday, it's pretty calm. You're looking at 6 to 10 mile an hour winds. But Saturday and Sunday, we're looking at 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. So one thing I think we're going to have to concentrate on, maybe if you're playing showdowns, maybe not so much Thursday, Friday, but Saturday, Sunday, the strokes gain around the green and you're scrambling, I think is going to come in big because these are smaller greens. So I think with that wind, we're maybe see a little bit less in terms of the average greens and regulation hit. So that strokes gain around the green if you're playing Saturday and Sunday. I mean, it's going to factor in, of course, if you're looking at guys, obviously you're looking for all six to make the cut. So that's going to be huge for winning the tournament. But specifically for showdown Saturday, Sunday, that's something I will factor into my model if that weather forecast keeps up.
Yeah, so I was trying to, while you were talking about the weather there, I was trying to pull up the wind finder. I'm having trouble getting
I'm going to
to
post.
Hawaii. Hold on.
I just posted it in chat there.
Oh, you
It's
did?
the one. It is the Waialae Beach Park is the closest to the course. It looks like it's maybe like a kilometer or two away. Talking in Canadian here and kilometers. But yeah, it's not too far.
I can't, for some reason, it's not letting me pull the link. But if you want to pull that up and share your screen, we can take a look at it. But you know, like you said,
here. There. So I'll zoom in a little bit. So we got Thursday and Friday, yeah, that's 7 to 8 mile an hour, pretty much steady all day, maybe highest 12 mile an hour around noon to 5 p.m. So not too bad those first 2 days, but yeah, as you get into the Saturday, Sunday here, we're looking at steady 17, 18 mile an hour, 19 mile an hour on Sunday winds. So that could definitely factor in a little bit, and that could change a little bit going into the weekend, but we'll definitely touch on that in chat if something changes in terms of the showdown stuff. Because the sheet is you're updating that sheet throughout the weekend in terms of pricing and stuff for showdown. And we talking about it in chat and going over our top plays going into those and the guys that are leading in certain stats that we're kind of keying in on. So definitely pay attention in chat. If you're not in there yet, definitely grab yourself a subscription to our PGA package or our All Sports. Because like Dane said earlier, we're covering up to 10 plus sports daily, including college sports as well. That's what Dane's been crushing. So definitely get in there and get that up to date throughout the entire weekend, especially if you're playing showdown.
Yeah. So really, if you the only other thing that I would add in terms of stats is this is a place that almost off the tee to me, and it's not quite as tight, but it almost resembles a Hilton Head to me, where you have to maybe club down a little bit off the tee. So when it comes to driving accuracy, it's a little harder to quantify exactly what they're hitting off the tee because there's a guy that we'll get to that I actually kind of like this week that isn't very good off the tee, but he's shown an ability to be good at these types of courses, Hilton Head being one of them. And we'll get to him in a bit. But I think it's definitely one of those, shorter, more accurate type, style course where last week was just a full-on bomb and gouge. And you mentioned, the past winning scores here, and it was Cam Smith that year in 20 that you were talking about.
Yes.
So, I mean, last year Grayson was at 17, Si Woo was 18. Before that, Decky was 23. So we're probably going to see, I'm thinking somewhere between 15 and 18 with what we saw on the weekend in terms of win there that you just pulled up. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it below 20 or above 20, if you want to look at it that way. I don't think it quite gets, to a full-on birdie fest, but I do think, it's somewhere middle of the road in terms of the PGA Tour. But if you look at the historic winners, I mean, you start to see that trend. You've got Russ Henley has a really good history here. Decky is, of course, one here. Cam Smith is kind of falls into that type of what I just said, not good off the tee, but he can club down and put himself in play and work his way around a place like this, which he did. Si Woo's kind of the same way. I don't think of him as a great off the tee player, but he's a really good iron player, and he can get it done. Kisner a couple years ago, same way. He's not going to murder off the tee and things. So what we're going to do, and we're going to try to do this a little different. There's a couple things that I want to show everybody on the sheet that we've changed, at least for early in the year on one part, and the other will be there for the entire year. And instead of going through the ranges and just kind of doing the same things that everybody does on these shows and going by upper range, mid, low, whatever, and talking about who we like the most, we're going to really focus more on roster construction, which is going to end up meaning we talk about plays in all the different ranges, but maybe a slightly different thought process on why we like them and things than just saying we like this guy or we rank them the top. So the two things on the sheet, one is Korn Ferry Tour stuff. We've got the Korn Ferry guys who graduated here and were on the Korn Ferry last year, so they don't have any PGA Tour stats, but we were able to pull in the Korn Ferry stats from 2024 and make a separate tab for just those players. So we didn't want to aggregate everything together, Korn Ferry, and just throw them and rank them how they were doing percentages and, greens and regulations and things versus the PGA Tour guys, because completely different course, usually an easier course for the most part. Than what they see week to week on the PGA Tour. So we didn't want to aggregate those together, so we just put it separate. But I think it is beneficial to look at in terms of their stats from previous years to see the types of player that they are. So we have that. That'll be probably for the first month or two of the season that we'll keep that going. And then we'll just use this current year's PGA Tour stats. The other thing that we added last week was this builder tab. And we're still going to have ranks and cores as well. But we have a lot of people that'll make copies of the sheet, make their own model throughout the week with the way that we have it set up. And then they'll, look at that and use their own instead of just using our percentages. Well, I wanted to have this for these people too, because this is really beneficial to me, at least if I was building 20 teams or 10 teams or 5 teams. I know a lot of our members are building 3 to 5 probably each week and not max entering stuff to where they would use an optimizer for something like PGA. So we've got this builder tab that right now it's set up for 5 teams. You could expand that out to however many you want, but you've got if you type a player's name in here, like if we go Russell Henley, and you're just building teams on these tabs, and if you put in Russell Henley, it'll automatically say, all right, you have him in one of your 5 lineups right now, and so on and so forth with all the players. If you make a copy of the sheet and you want to add teams, you'll just come down here and go copy, paste down below, and now you'll have your 6th team. The other thing you'll need to do is come into this J column and just change your amount of teams to 6, 7, 8, however many you've got so that the percentage is right. But I think that'll be really powerful for some of our hand builders that they can use something like that and always know what exposure they have when they're just hand building teams, because some players will get lost in the shuffle when you do hand build. It's happened to me before, and you tend to, when you're doing, that's why optimizers are pretty beneficial in a lot of cases, because you get certain percentages of guys that you tell it you want, whereas if you're hand building, you might zero in on one certain guy and you just start clicking him on every lineup that you're building or something. So any thoughts on those two things? And if not, we'll start building some teams and talking through some of these plays.
No, I love what you did with pulling Korn Ferry Tour stats for some of these guys early in the season when the stats, you're getting small sample sizes and you just want to look back and see, like you said, what kind of player you can get a real clue of what kind of a player some of these young guys are. Are they accuracy? Are they bombers? Are they really good putters? You can tell that. I mean, you're not comparing apples to apples with the PGA Tour pros, but we're at least getting a feel of that player's style. So I like that a lot. And then the lineup builder, I was a manual builder as well. I didn't use an optimizer. So I really like that you can plug that in. You've made it so easy to be able to go ahead and do that, even copy paste. It works really well if you're building, because then you don't miss your guys. You got your exposures right in front of you. It just makes that hand building process so much more easy to try and get the right exposures and not wake up in the morning after everything is locked and realize you've got 80% of someone who is +5. So it's an absolutely wonderful tool. So the only other thing I wanted to mention before jumping into any players is just a couple of courses that we can look to as comp, kind of your shorter. They're not all par 70s, but you're kind of your shorter, more accuracy, club down off the tee, like you said, where that is really important, hitting the fairway in most spots, but then especially with your approach shots and some smaller greens. You've got Colonial Country Club. We've got Harbor Town Golf Links is another one that stands out to me. And then finally, one that's really I've looked at a lot in terms of building my core out so far was the Sea Island Golf Course and the RSM Classic, which happened just not too long ago. It's a lot of these players' last tournament played. So that's one I was looking at as well. So those three definitely something I'm looking at. But other than that, let's just jump right in here. I know myself while I'm talking, my build this week, and I'm quite excited because I didn't play DFS a lot last year after like 10 straight years of playing DFS golf and going hardcore. Last year I took kind of off and I built a lineup today after going through the field, going through making a bunch of notes on these players that I like. I love a balanced build this week. I know a lot of people are going to be after Decky at the top. He's won here. He's coming off a win. It all kind of lines up for him to be fair. I think fairly high owned at that 11K price range. But I just absolutely love the balance build this week, and I'll kind of go through it as we talk about players here and there. But that is definitely the way I'm going this week. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way to go. The first thing that I noticed early on when I first opened this up is last year they introduced this 5K range to us, which we don't have this week. They didn't do it for any no-cut events, so I didn't expect it really for last week. But now you come into the first full field event, and we don't have one. So I don't know if that means they're just not going to have the 5K pricing this year, or if that they just didn't do it this week and they want to keep us on our toes. But that did is it kind of opened up a lot more of the 6K guys were guys who normally were in the low sevens, and it opened up, being able to do a little more stars and scrubs. So I do like a lot of this mid-range, and even at the top of pricing, some of these guys that are slightly below the top, like you mentioned, Decky. I like the idea DOB mentioned here in the chat, just lock in Connors and get different somewhere else. I think there's a lot of merit to that. Right. He was really, really good last year, and he's been really good here in the past. And if you think of this course, you pretty much think of the ideal person as Russell Henley. So I really like that idea. And, you do get that discount off of Hideki at the very top.
Yeah, I've got 4 guys highlighted so far on not all core guys, but 4 guys that I'm going to be at least have exposure to in that top. You say 9,000 and up. Hideki and Henley are definitely in there, but Keegan Bradley's the next one down. But my favorite out of the group that I'll be starting a lot of my lineups with, and if I was only playing one, I would start it with him, is Maverick McNeely. He's almost 2K cheaper than Matsuyama, which kind of forces you to not have to go the stars and scrubs route or dip down into that 6K range, unless you really want to go heavy on the 8K plus guys. I'm kind of looking at targeting 4 8K plus guys to start my lineup this week, and he's definitely number 1. He's number 2 in my model on when I made a copy of the spreadsheet and adjusted some stats and stuff to my model this week. He's number 2. decent course history, making the cut all 3 trips here. He's got a top 10 2 years ago. He is top 10 in strokes gained off the tee, 16th in putting, first in par 4 scoring, ninth in birdie or better percentage in my model. I just think he's playing the best golf of his career here. I pulled up his stats. He's got 3 top 10s. He's got 5 top 17s in his last 5 events going back to the Shriners. That's after starting this fall season. After the fall season, it's 2025 now, but the Pro Tour and the Sanderson, he missed the cut, and then he's just been reeling off really good finishes and pretty much playing good all around, except for, there's a few events where he's lost like a stroke putting. So, I mean, I feel like there's still more upside. A win at the RSM Classic. I talked about the RSM Classic being sort of a place that I look at for the comp course, at least the plantation side of it. So, definitely he is number one in my own personal rankings this week for where I'm starting my lineups.
Yeah, so and I've plugged him into the builder here, and that can maybe you start with this balanced build, that can maybe lead into the guy that I mentioned earlier that I really like, that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being a guy on these shorter types of courses, and because he's not so good off the tee. But if you look back at history, he was second at Harbor Town last year, a comp course that you mentioned, and I really like that one as well. And before that, he was fifth the year before, the year that Matt Fitzpatrick won in 24. So, or in 23. So if you look at Sahith Theegala, I don't think he's going to be very on this week because of that thought process. I mean, I think he'll be, somewhere 10 to 12% owned. I don't think many people will go there. But I really like his ability around the green. I like him. I like his short game a lot. And he's a solid, iron player. He's just not very good off the tee. And, when he can club down and just put himself in play, I think that really benefits him. He was a guy, and this really isn't very relatable for this week necessarily, but last year at Pinehurst at the U.S. Open, I followed him around that whole Sunday. And there's some holes there that at least early on, like 1 and I think number 2 and 3, you're not hitting driver off the first few holes. And he was putting himself in the fairway, and he started out pretty hot. He missed a makeable birdie on 1. He birdied 2. And I'm pretty sure he missed a really short birdie on 3 there at the Sunday of the U.S. Open. And then he goes to the next few holes, and he's hitting driver off the tee, and he's getting in the freaking sand and waste areas, and having to hack out and all this stuff. And it's like, you can really see these stats come to life when you're watching these people in person. It's like,
exactly,
he just fell completely apart. And he scraped around there and had a solid day, but it was like, wow, that kind of stuff now comes back to mind, because it's like, if he can club down most of this place around and just put himself in play, and he can let the rest of his game, where he can attack these greens with wedges and mid irons, and then he can make putts, and he's got a great around the green game if he does miss. I think you can really see a guy like that come alive here. Whereas I don't think a lot of people will. He's not going to pop, I don't think, in models necessarily, because people are putting that driving accuracy and things in play this week, and they should be, but it doesn't factor in that he's less than driver off the tee necessarily. So
exactly.
Let's plug those 2 in, and then let's see what we've got left here to build, because you might even be able to go back up and get somebody in the upper 9s. I like Tom Kim. I think he's a really good option this week. Again, he's just the type of guy that you would expect to fit this type of course. And a guy down below these that I really like in the mid 8s, I don't know how popular he's going to get, but Luke Clanton is a guy who just burst onto the scene last year. It just seems like every single week, and I'm going to jinx him here, but it seems like every single week he's in contention. It's like he's an amateur. He's an amateur. He's an amateur. It's like he doesn't – I don't even think of him as that anymore. So he's got so much experience, and he's been in contention at this point so many times that he almost, can just burst right on at this point. So and win sometime this year. So I like him. I think that price tag in this field overall is a little low. I would have expected him about 500 more, honestly, with the form that he's had. So I like him quite a bit in there. So any guys, as we continue, either a balanced or maybe we do kind of a, hybrid balanced or whatever you want to call it. If you
how much do we got left there?
We got 79.25 left for 4 spots.
Yeah. So first of all, Dane hasn't seen my notes, and number 2 guy on my target list to talk about that I've made notes about today was Luke Clanton. So I definitely like him. He doesn't show up on our model specifically because he didn't have course history. He doesn't have any stats because he's an amateur. He didn't play a whole bunch last year. But literally, as an amateur in 2024, he made 7 of 8 cuts, including 4 top 10s, 3 top 5s, and 2 runner-ups, one of which came at the RSM Classic here in the fall. Looking at the Fantasy National model, looking at over the last 12 rounds, he's number 1 in my model. He's first in fairways gained, 7th off the tee, 15th in approach, 2nd in opportunities gained, 1st in birdies gained. And like you said, the price. I really like the price. You think an amateur 8,400, you're like, oh boy, that's that feels like a lot. He was 9,500 at the Procore Championship, 8,600 at the RSM. So that price is definitely trending down, despite the amazing form, amazing stats. So I'm on board with Luke Clanton as well. Another guy that I like, kind of right in that exact same range, is Ben Griffin. He checks almost every box for me. He's finished T30 and T12 here in 2 trips to the Sony Open. He's played really well in the fall, making 6 of 7 cuts, 4 straight top 25s coming in, and 2 straight top 15 finishes, where he's gained 8.9 and 9.3 strokes total on the field. He's been not great in accuracy, ranking 39th. I mean, that's still pretty good, but this isn't like an elite field by any means. 39th in fairways gained, in the last 12 rounds. But he's impressed with his irons a lot. He's 10th in strokes gained approach, 13th in birdie or better because of that. So the putter's been actually pretty good. And speaking of the putter, talking about Bermuda greens, he's like a top 5, top 10 putter on tour, in my opinion, in terms of putting on Bermuda grass. So Ben Griffin would be another guy. I actually think Luke Clanton, just because people are going to be running a lot of these most recent form models, that he's going to see quite a bit of ownership. So Ben Griffin, while he's going to see some ownership as well, I think he's going to be a little bit lower. I do like both of them a lot. If I had to choose one, it would be probably Ben Griffin with his experience. But Clanton, I think both of them, I think, are in a great spot this week.
Yeah, so if you look back at Clanton's end of the year on our sheet here, take a look at where he was, had this format. And it's a lot of the places that I would say are decent comps. You got John Deere, 2nd. I think that's actually a decent comp course for here. 5th at the Wyndham, which is a shorter course. RSM, you've already mentioned. He was 2nd there in the end of the fall. So I just last touch point on him. He's the types of courses that he's been playing well on are ones that we like as comps. So, really like him. So if you throw him onto our build, and you could play both of those guys that you just mentioned, Ben Griffin and Clanton, but you've got 77, 67. So if you just keep going down this balanced build, you've got McNeely, Thagala, Clanton, Griffin, and you got 75-50 left over for a couple more spots. So let's go down into the 7s and see if there's some guys that we are excited about down there. Do you have any that just completely jump off the page at you?
Well, I think it's early. I mean, it's January 7th, but comeback player of the year candidate Daniel Berger stands out to me
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah,
He's dealt with a lot of injuries, kind of been in and out. But this price it seems like a really good price. He comes with a lot of upside, I think, at that price. Um, a rocky season prior to the fall portion with just two top 25s leading up to that fall portion of the season. And after a missed cut at the first fall event, the Pro Core, he's reeled off six straight made cuts, including two top tens, one of which, again, here we go, RSM Classic, where he gained 6.8 strokes off the tee and 3.9 strokes putting. I think that is a combination that gives you a lot of safety, where he's going to hit, a lot of fairways, give himself a chance to hit a lot of greens, and he's a really good putter. So either he's going to be making a lot of birdies, maybe saving some pars, but if he can get his irons on again, I think with that combination, there's a ton of upside there, especially at 7,500. Like I think going to be, say, the comeback this year. We're probably going to end up seeing him in some tournaments, maybe touch the 9K ring, in my opinion, kind of like where he used to reside, kind of in that low 9, high 8K range player. So, yeah, I really like that price and that value, especially looking at our DK price odds differential ranking on the sheet.
yeah,
That shows us that I think he's a +5 on DraftKings, really high on Yahoo, obviously. We don't talk about Yahoo a lot, but across the board, DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo, he's a plus there in terms of that salary to odds differential. So I like that too. I use that quite a bit when I start getting down into the 7K range because that's kind of where your odds really differ. And we were talking about this off the air. Depending on what site you use, can really find some of those players down in the range that may be way different odds than other guys, and at least points you in the right direction to go start doing some digging. And the fact that he's been playing well, I really think this could be one of those years. And just looking at his course history, he's played here 6 times. He's made the cut all 6 times, and he's got a top 10 in his most recent T7 in 2021, and two other top 15s in 2018 and 2015. So he does check a lot of boxes. I mean, there is probably some risk there, but again, I'm willing to take on that risk at 7,500.
yeah, yeah. I agree. He broke my heart at the RSM because I had bet him, and you said he gained like 3 strokes putting, and I feel like he lost like 6 on Sunday. So, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Every putty came over. I'm pretty sure he missed on Sunday. So, but anyway, yeah, I think he's a really good option. One thing that I'm going to do, I think, this year is I've worried about ownership so much in the past. And I think this week will be a good example that it's going to be spread out, that you're going to be making decisions based on somebody who's 10 and somebody who's 15%. That doesn't matter. It does not matter 10 versus 15. 10 versus 17 doesn't matter. I mean, if you like somebody that's 17 versus half of that, play the person you like. That is something that
Lock it in.
have, I got to work. I'm talking to myself too when I say this.
Yeah.
I got to stop worrying about it because that's not something that it's more about how you put the lineup together rather than if you just have a player that's a little popular. And I think that plays into the guys at the top, like Russell Henley, Hideki, if you like him, play him. But what this does here on our balance build is it leaves us 7,600, and I think there's a lot of ways you can go in that last spot. Another guy that I like in that range is Eric Cole. I think he fits this course. Thor Bjornsson is a guy that I think is going to have a really good year. He's a bomber type guy, so I think he's definitely more of a secondary look for me because I want to see him be able to club down and play some of these courses. Does he have – I was going to look at some of his history from last year and in the fall at these types of – did he play the RSM? Let's see here. Because he was 8th, WD 8th.
RSM, yeah, 8th. Sanderson was 8th.
Okay, so we have seen it. somewhat at
And
a
he did his
shorter
thing.
course.
He lost almost 2 strokes off the tee, but he gained 8 strokes on approach. So I definitely think he's a guy with a ton of upside. If he can club down like you've been talking about and get himself
Second
onto
at
the
the John
fairway,
Deere too.
Yep,
Yeah, so I
100%.
think he's falls into that category as well. So you can go him in that range. You could leave some salary and play Adam Svensson, who I like quite a bit down there at 7,200. I don't hate leaving 400, especially in PGA. So there's a lot of guys in that range that you can play. Putnam, he somewhat fits this course. He's not in the greatest of form. Trying to see any
One
other
that
guys
scares
that
me a little
you would
bit, Andrew Novak is 12th in my model on the sheet. He's got a 12th here in 2023. I mean, it's circled around missed cut last year and his T66 in 2022. But he's coming in with some decent form. He had a second at the Butterfield Bermuda. The RSM scares me a bit with that T35 because he lost 6 strokes off the tee, but he absolutely crushed everywhere else. So again, more of a GPP. If you're playing cash, I'm definitely not targeting him. But to fill that last spot, especially in our lineup, I do like Novak as well. I think he's got that upside. And then circling back again on what you said about ownership, I agree. Unless you're playing 1,000 lineups, that ownership between 10 and 12, 10 and 15%. It's really not that big a deal. Play the guys you like if you're only playing 3 lineups or 5 lineups, even 10 lineups. Don't worry about that little small difference. The only time I really worry about ownership is to try and find those guys that maybe you're completely overlooked that can get you that 1% or less. And if those guys do good, you're definitely going to be ahead of the game if you put the rest of the lineup together. So that there's different ways to look at ownership. But yeah, sitting there sweating over a guy between 10 and 15% is it's kind of a waste of time. Play the guy that you like. Don't get off a guy just because he may be 3% less than the other guy. Don't you start playing that game and you're going to regret things when you get into Sunday.
Yeah, it's really more than just looking at somebody who's even 20% or more. It's almost looking at the product ownership between your lineup. It's like when you start putting multiple of those together, like 3 of those players together, okay, now you're starting to get to the point of you have so many less paths to win a tournament. But when you're just looking at somebody individually at 20% and you're like, man, I love this play this week, 20% shouldn't scare you versus if they were 15. I mean, there's essentially no difference. It's just when you're building out these teams, that's when you need to start thinking about, do I want to put all of this together? Do I want to play all the chalk together? No. And I think I need to do some testing to see like the product ownership of some of these winning teams. And I don't know, have you ever done any of that? Like just looked at the multiplication out of each of the ownerships together instead of just like adding them together, like looking at as they how people are played together?
No, I haven't really broke that down a whole well, at least for quite a while. But that's definitely something I'm interested in finding out for sure. I'm with you there, 100% in finding that out. To me, it's more about the core you build. Like if I'm playing 20 lineups, let's say I want to have a core of say 4 players that I play 5 times, and then switch out those other 2. And that's kind of how I'll build if I'm multi-entering is I'm going to live or die, and not so much on say 10 or 15 lineups with the same core 4 and hope that if one of those core 4 goes, you're done. I'm not going that much risk, but definitely like building say like 3 or 4 different cores in that 20 max build and going with 4 players and 5 lineups, switching the 2 out, and then maybe switching 1 player out, and then switching the core around for the next 5 lineups, and then doing that again for the final 5 lineups, just to be kind of bought in on say 6 players total within that 20 max is kind of the way I look at it. So that if those 4 guys are you definitely the guys that you're really really high on, in that 20 max build go off, you've got a really good chance at doing it. I mean, a lot of people will be even riskier and take those 20 lineups and have 3 golfers or 4 golfers that they're putting like almost 100% in on. Whereas, yeah, you're going to win a lot of money, but you're not going to win as often. So it's kind of a trade-off of how much risk you want to put down on the table when you're building that 20 max build for sure.
Yeah. So the last guy I'll mention for this team that you could use, I think, is Seamus Power. Pretty good fall swing, and he fits this type of course to me quite a bit as well. So let's just kind of throw some other builds out there for people. So this was our very balanced build that I think is definitely viable this week. And if let's go back and do like a Russell Henley team, because I think we both like him at the top.
While you're plugging that in, I built it is very close to our first one. I've got McNeely, Clanton, Ben Griffin. So the only thing different I did was I left the Gala out and I went McNeely, Clanton, Ben Griffin, and Daniel Berger. That was my first 4, and I'm like, I really like that. So if I was building the 20 max, I'd build 5 lineups around that core 4. And then one way that I went about doing it that I really, really liked was like going back to Dobb here is Henley. I wanted to plug him in. So I threw him in there and that left me 6,800. So I started digging around in that sub 7K range that I said I wasn't going to touch this week. But one guy that stood out in my model, in the Fantasy National model, has some course history, has a little bit of form, was Henrik Norlander actually at 6,800. He's had a very solid fall season in 2024. He made the cut in 6 and 7 events, top 10 at the Black Desert, T17 at his last event played at the RSM Classic. In that event, he gained 7 strokes tee to green. So, I mean, he's coming in with some good form. He's 24th in my Fantasy National model, 27th in my sheet model. And over the last 12 rounds, he's 9th in proximity from that 175 to 200. So if he's clubbing down, and he's getting it on the fairway and has a lot of those longer approaches in the 2 ranges that I talked about. He's solid there. 31st in fairways gained. I mean, that's well above average, and 29th in strokes gained off the tee. I think he's a guy you could fit in if you wanted to squeeze him lane and still kind of get that core 4 that we talked about earlier in the show. So that's definitely one build that I like, and we were on the right track there, just kind of building it the way we did on the builder. But what's another way you're thinking?
Yeah, so, and one of I didn't even realize this guy was in the field until just now. But another one of my guys from last year that a lot of people probably saw on the sheets and things was down in the low 7Ks. We've got Mac Meissner. We were on him one week where he just like came out of the blue and finished like second, and I'm trying to figure out what week that was. I think it was.
I so remember that too.
Top 5.
It was Charles Schwab, so that's a comp course.
A comp course too. Oh, perfect.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So I'm pulling up his stats here from last year on the sheet because I'm trying to remember. He was really good on approach, kind of middle of the road off the tee. There was something he always really popped in.
His irons was really popping for me.
Yeah, it was his
like
irons.
He's gained strokes, and it looks like about 11 straight events in his irons. And most recently at the Black Desert Classic there, where he finished T25, he gained 7.4 strokes. If he didn't lose 3 strokes putting, like he really had a bad putter that week, he probably would have seen at least a top 10 there.
Yeah, so if you start to throw this build together where you go Russ, Henley, and Clanton, and then you drop down to like a Mac Meissner, and because you need the salary, you don't need that.
You know his real name?
That 3, what was that?
Do you know his real name?
I remember seeing it because there was always a name error in freaking Fantasy National last year, and I can't remember it now.
McClure.
McClure Meissner. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a hell of a name. I love it. Double M.
I like it. We'll call him Mr. McClure here. So
Yeah.
Henley, Clanton, and McClure down here at 71. That leaves you 82. So you can just pepper this 8K range if you wanted to. You can play Griffin. You can go back into that upper sevens or mid sevens and play Daniel Berger. We both really liked him. If you play him, that leaves you 85-50. You can play. Let's see. You could go back up into the nines and get somebody in the low.
Yeah.
You can play Thagala. You can play Siwoo. I think is an okay option here. Poston fits this type of course. Pendrith was really good last week. I wouldn't hate him. There's a lot you can do here that if you wanted to go double at the top or go one at the top and just start peppering this mid-range like we kind of talked about with the last build, I think you could do it because like if you throw Ben Griffin, you got 8,900. That leaves you right on Poston, Pendrith, Eckroat, that range there. If you go back down a little lower and go to there was somebody – Harry Hall was a wagon for us last week. We mentioned him on I don't know that he fits this course, but he can get super hot. Something we touched on last week on Twitter was he was one of our early week looks for value plays in that field. That was a success from last week. And he did get hot, with the putter. So you could go back there. I don't like the price tag, to be honest, this week on him at 80, all the way up at 81. But Harmon feels kind of low. I mean, I know he's not like in the best of form at 8,300, though. He seems kind of low
he's got that upside
to me.
He's got good course history.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not the best form, but it's not like the worst either. So
no,
he's
12th 2 weeks ago.
12th at the Hero, which isn't. I added the Hero in there, so that's maybe a little misleading. But 25th at RSM, which is one he probably should have been a little better at. He's just kind of been middle of the road. Travelers is another one that's a kind of less than driver off the tee course that I think you could look at. He was 9th there last year.
He's just accurate.
He just seems like he would fit this course, and we know he's got the upside to be a lot more in this field than 8,300. So I think
he's probably going to be lower owned as well because if anyone's looking at last week where he lost 10 strokes putting,
I don't think he's going to be owned at all. Yeah,
no,
I don't.
He's
I
one
don't
of those
think anybody's going to play him. You got Griffin, who's going to get a lot of ownership. You got Clanton. He's literally sandwiched between two guys that are going to take a bunch of ownership in that range. When I say a bunch, I just mean a bunch of that range's ownership.
Yes, for sure. That's a better way to look at ownership. You nailed it right there. Is you kind of look at the ranges, especially when you're building out the style of lineup that you're going to build, and think when you get to that range, who are going to be the higher owned guys? Well, Clanton and Griffin, obviously, and like you said, he's sandwiched right between those two. He could be 0.5, 0.8, less than 1% owned, and like he's super accurate. So yeah, he fits the course. So definitely don't shy away from last week's Birdie Fest where he just kind of fell off and played like shit.
Yeah, so I don't think this is. I think this is a really good example of the build that we're talking about. Of we like Henley. Henley's going to be fairly popular, but we don't care. Clanton's going to be fairly popular. Berger's going to be fairly popular. But then we love those three guys, So we come down and we've got Brian Harmon, who's got talent. He's got notoriety in terms of his play and his name, but he's not going to be played this week. And we think he's too cheap. So we get a 5 to 10% Harmon, and we play that together with Meissner. So what I mean by product ownership is you've got three popular guys, but how many are playing, those three together? The combinations just go down, down, down as you play these together. And when you throw in, even just if it's two low-owned guys, it just drops way down. So
separate yourself.
Yeah, so I like that. We can do one more team, and then we'll get out of here. like to keep this right around an hour. The last one, got any direction you want to go for the last one?
Well, just looking at, and I don't want to give away the whole entire lineup there. 8,800 left, so there's a couple ways you can go with that last lineup. But one guy I'd like to try and fit in, who I don't think is going to be super high owned again. I think Clanton and Griffin, and then going up to McNeely, Keegan Bradley. He kind of fits right in the middle of all four of those guys that I really like. Is Austin Eckroat, up in that 8,700, T42 last year, T12. He's coming in with really good form. 15th last week, which whatever, it was a birdie fest, not, but 17th at the RSM, regained 6.7 tee to green. He putted well, and then he won the Worldwide Technology, and he's just making a lot of cuts. I think he's made like 8 straight, and 9 of his last 10, I believe. So he's just playing really well. He's got a lot of upside. He seems to fit the course. He's played well here in the past, and too, I think he could be like upside of a top 10. I don't think he's someone that's going to come out and win, but I think he's got that top 10 upside. And I don't think, like I said, he's maybe like a 5% or less own guy. I think just with the other guys that we talked about, he's kind of fallen in the middle. So that's definitely one guy I wanted to ask you about. He's been talked about a little bit, but Billy Horschel under 8K. Any interest in him with course history? He's got some form. Are you muted?
Rookie.
Rookie mistake.
I'm almost a never Billy guy, but this is the type of place that you do play him on if you do. And he was, let's see, when he was good through the playoffs last year. That little run there in the late summer is when he kind of came on, and he did win Corrales. But that kind of jump started the rest of his year. So I don't hate that. I wonder I don't think he's going to get too highly owned either.
No.
I'm almost like this for whatever reason, and I probably should get out of doing stuff like this, but I'm like, I guess it's like biases against guys. I don't know. I just, I don't ever seem to get him right is probably what the problem is. But I mean, yeah, this is the accuracy place is more so the one that I like to play him at, if I was going to, but I don't know that I'll get there this week personally.
We should build a Hideki lineup. That's what we should do.
So let's build one of those, and then the last thing that we'll do to close it out is we'll go back to the Corn Ferry tab and see if there's any guys. We might not have any, plays that we're really high on right now just because it's early, still fairly early in the week. We got one more day, to do builds. So we need to maybe deep dive into these guys a little bit more than the stats from just last year. But I do want to take a look at who are some of the guys that pop in the types of players that we're looking for just by the numbers. And then we can deep dive into those as we go into tomorrow. But yeah, let's do a Hideki team and see what that leaves us. Where would you go after that? Do we need to find one of these?
I mean, he's not
Corn Ferry in this field. Guys?
In this field, you'd think he would have been more like the 11-8, 12,000, and it would separate you. So 11,000 isn't too bad. I think you can still grab a guy in the 8K range and still play safe. So, I mean, we could definitely grab a guy that we've already talked about in terms of like Clanton or Griffin. I think you can go that route. Harmon, because, I mean, a Clanton especially, I mean, that's still leaving you 76, and then you grab a guy in the 6, and then you're back into that 7 to 8K range. It's still not too bad. You don't really got to go superstars and scrubby whatsoever. But I honestly, when I start my Hideki lineup builds, I automatically go down to that sub 7K range just to see where I'm at. And Norlander was one that stood out to me that I threw in, and that brings you up to an 8K average. Then you can really
so you
can
go. You can go Norlander, or you could go into that really low 7K range because you've got Svensson down there at 72 that I mentioned briefly earlier. You've got McClure, Meissner down there that we could go to. But yeah, if you throw Norlander, you're at 79. Let's see who else is in that. But see, like then you can also go. You can just play a couple of those mid sevens guys like Berger and Cole and Thorbjornsen. And like you said, you're like right back into the eights. So really, you could get another 9 with Decky for sure if you wanted to. If you threw one in now with another 8, like if you threw a low, like let's go back to McNeely. If you throw that in there, you could do that and then play 2 of those low guys. Like you could do that team and play Meissner and Berger with those last 2 spots. So that's something that I don't hate.
Superstars and scrubs. I like what you just said with McNeely, Matsuyama, and Norlander, and then another guy I like down there is Lipsky, coming off back-to-back top tens himself. He kind of stands out for me a little bit. Where was he in my stats? One of the last 12 rounds. Yeah, we're looking at 15th in fairways gained, 12th in putting. That alone, I like 34th in approach. So I mean, he's well above average in approach shots too. So I think this is definitely a place where Lipsky can come in. He's another guy where he's missed 2 cuts, but he's sandwiched a T4 in between, coming off 2 top tens. It's very risky, but it's coming with a lot of upside as well. Because if a guy like that comes in and gives you a top 10 again, at 6,600, and Norlander gives you, say, a top 15, top 20, you get those 2 guys right. Now all of a sudden you got Matsuyama and McNeely, and that leaves you with just those 4 alone, 8,200. So I mean, then you've got back into that range that we absolutely love, and we started the show off with kind of is that 8K range. You can go pick 2 of those guys, or high 7, low 8, and kind of mix in there with those 2 guys. That's a really stars and scrubs way to go. Which again, I think gets you off the ownership for one, like you talked about, getting 1 or 2 of those really low owned guys in there is going to help your lineup tremendously in terms of that group ownership.
Do you think we get a Gary Woodland bounce back year?
I've been bit by him so many times. I don't know if we do or not. He's been playing good coming in. I mean, he's got T16, T9, T33 in his last 3 events coming into this one. So it's something that's possible for sure.
Yeah, Lee Hodges is down there coming off of 5th at RSM, 16th at Zozo, 8th Black Desert. I mean, he was good in the fall. You've got some other, cheap guys that do make some sense. Lipsky, like you said, is a solid low range play. Let's look at just a couple Corn Ferry guys, and then we'll get out of here. McCarty, obviously a Corn Ferry guy, but won on the PGA Tour in the fall. You've got some of these guys at the upper part of these Corn Ferry players have played more on the PGA Tour. Some of these, I wasn't able to go back and do their history in terms of their current form and just put Corn Ferry stuff on there because it would have took way too much time. I did something similar to Live when I first started that sheet, but I had to literally go back, and it was either I just put cut or I had to go back and find out where they actually were number-wise, which took like an absurd amount of time to figure out. But anyway, so I don't have a lot of that stuff in terms of current form in here. A couple guys that I would want to look at that are popping up on here because I don't know where their form is from, but this Meow, William Meow. I'm pretty sure and I'm probably obviously butchering that, but I'm pretty sure he played in the fall is where this came from. Let me see. No, he didn't. I don't know where that result came from. Where did that result come from?
Yeah, I don't know.
That is interesting.
Another guy here.
Where's that current form coming from?
One guy that stands out to me, like you said, looking at stats, is Brian Campbell on that list.
Yeah,
Um,
accuracy.
he's
Yeah, all that.
he's the highest of the accuracy of all those guys. He's up there in good drive percentage. He's been really, really good on the par fours, and he's good around the green. So he's a guy that I think can, pop this week in terms of those Corn Ferry Tour guys. He was one guy that I just want to watch golf. I don't think he's going to do good here in terms of the course. Just looking at the stats and kind of, I haven't seen him play yet, but I'm just looking at his stats, and I'm pretty sure I can. He's a bomber. Is Potgeier, and I'm sure I'm saying that completely wrong and butchering that name too. But the 336.5 yard average is just blowing everyone else out of the water. But then you look at the accuracy and everything else behind it, and it's just not really good at all. But he's a guy I just really excited to watch golf.
Yeah. Yeah. So I, for some reason, literally cannot find this, and that's going to bother me. This Mo, whatever. I cannot find his stats. But he did go to Pepperdine, it seems. So that's where Tagala went, I believe. But anyway, we can look at maybe his
keep
stats.
Thinking about Super Troopers.
Yeah, I'm going to be this Stephen Fisk is really popping.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's because of something. He was number one in this field in greens and reg. Really good ball striker, it seems, is why he's popping so much. So he might be a guy at 6,400 that you could pop into some 20 max teams. Let me see if but yeah, Brian Campbell was a guy that was pretty interesting. Who was another? Yeah, his driving average distance was 285, which is like absurdly low, but he was accurate. So let's see. You also had
this guy on. I mean, he had a win and a bunch of top fives in the Corn Ferry last year. 6 top tens, a couple runner ups, a win. Yeah. He looked really good. That was more geared towards early in the season. He struggled a bit down the stretch, a little more up and down with some miscuts. 3 miscuts in his last 6 events, but the other ones were top 20s. He's definitely, I think, got the upside to pop here. But yeah, I guess overall, if I had to pick 3 guys from this list, it would be Fisk, Campbell, and probably it's between McGreevy and McCarty, but probably just being McCarty at the top. I like how the model likes him as well.
Yeah. So there's some guys definitely there that we want to dive in maybe a little more into tomorrow. Maybe we can find some value down in the 6s, because there are going to be some of these that pop out and are good plays in terms of DFS at the price tags. Chris Ventura was a guy that we saw a few years ago on the PGA Tour. I'm pretty sure what was it? Him and Victor. I know they're obviously from Norway together, but didn't they go to college or something? Anyway, he rates out number 1 in the DK value ranking at because he's 300 to 1 and he's 6,200 this week. So that's something that you could look at as well. But he does have some PGA Tour experience. It wasn't very good at the end, obviously, which is why he went back to the Corn Ferry. But obviously, he played good last year on the Corn Ferry, so he is cheap. Let me see, just real quick before we get off here, I'm going to see how he finished up the year, or if he just got hot at a certain time of the year. Corn Ferry Tour Championship, he was 7th. Nationwide, he was 35th. That was all the way back in September on the Corn Ferry. So decent end of the year. I don't, maybe a second chance for him. He went to Oklahoma State. That was what it was. So he's got some pedigree that maybe he figures it out second go around.
Good for those stars and scrubs lineups. You really want to go super risky and fit 2 low guys and a bunch of high guys. That's definitely a route you can consider for sure. Some of these lesser known guys. early in the season before they are higher owned.
Yeah. So quick summary. I think we're looking at, accuracy a little more off the tee, maybe club down off the tee, get in play, attack with your irons, get hot around the green and with your putter. And then, we're both a little more higher on the balanced build this week, coming off the top a little bit. You can start in the low nines, you can start in the high nines, and build a balanced lineup either way. So that's all I've got. We probably went a little over from what we'll do each and every week, but hey, this is the first one back for us together. So
super exciting,
right? All good. Hope everybody enjoyed. We will have highlights up on the sheet here either later tonight or into tomorrow, and then we'll have rankings up as well, and then cores probably both of us will post those tomorrow in terms of where we land on the sheet as well. So if you've tried us out in the past, or maybe you're not in our Discord and you have access to the sheet, we will have, a lot of times when we started, we just had cores in the chat. Now we're going to have them on the sheets, is what we're trying to do on most every sport. So we've got a tab, as you can see here, for each full tourney and each round of showdown. So we'll have that up. We'll be updating throughout the week, and we'll crush the Sony and move on to next. What is next week? I always feel like I know. All right, we got Hawaii to start, but then where do we go after that? Is it out west?
I believe we're heading to California. Yeah, it's the American Express. We got to jump into the three course rotation.
Yeah. So then, is there a? No, it's just one. Okay. Yeah. So then the next week is kind of when the season to me starts. You got the farmers. That's when it really kind of kicks off.
Love that Torrey Pines.
If you can see the hat, Torrey Pines on the hat here.
Showtime.
Yeah. So excited for that one here in a couple weeks. So that's always a fun one for me. A little tougher course that we can, start to. Not the north.
Start looking at some bombers.
South. Start looking at the ball strikers tee to green, and really, except last year, Matthew Pavon somehow found a way to win. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, the course rotation to me is never fun, no matter where it's at, though. So I wish they would do away with it, but I think it's in our life for the foreseeable future.
Forever. Yeah.
And they got rid of match play, which was the favorite week of the year from a DFS perspective. So that was sad.
Yeah,
last year we didn't have that. So
pretty sad. That was fun building that sheet.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get out of here.
Awesome.
Good luck to everybody this week, and we will see you next week.
Cheers, everybody.